So this is behind the build with ArDrive. Today I'm going to go deep into a couple areas that are core to us, our community and our open protocol. I'll share some of my lessons learned of being a founder in the Arweave ecosystem. Hopefully you can learn something new, whether it's about ArDrive or how you can manage your community or build your app. My name is Phil. I'm the founder of ArDrive. I was recently a system and solution architect for KPMG, crypto miner, node operator since 2017, and an Arweaver since the testnet. If you haven't heard about ArDrive yet, let me just explain it real quick before we talk about all the details behind it. ArDrive is a cross-platform file sync app built using Arweave. Really easy, familiar, intuitive user interface. Offers complete privacy using RFS, our protocol that we'll talk about. Quick, easy file sharing. You're only paying for what you save, no subscriptions. It's the beauty of Arweave, and it's community owned. So what do I mean by that? Community owned. ArDrive is not just an app, but it's actually backed by a profit sharing community hosted on Arweave. And it's kind of like a DAO, but a lot more. But what's the point of it, right? Why even bother with a profit sharing community? And here are some of the reasons that kind of have struck me over the past few months of why I think it's important to kind of use this model. First and foremost, a profit sharing community gives you a unique go-to-market strategy, right? You have this token that you could use as an incentive to attract users as well as talent. It is based off of a DAO, right? So you get the benefit of decentralized governance and design. So your community actually has a say in the fate of the applications with some of the decentralized governance tools that we have. The tokens themselves can actually enable some really neat things and app features, as well as can open up some different protocols. So again, it's something you just wouldn't be able to do without this kind of model. Having a profit sharing community really aligns the motives for not just your community members, but your developers, your core team for that real long-term success. And finally, and I think Tate was talking about some of these things, but it's just more fun. It's a little more unique, right? You have more opportunities to network and communicate with people around the world. And I've met so many people in this process so far. So I think this is why it's worth bothering with a profit sharing community. But we had a thought one day, communities, it's very open, broad term, different meanings to many, right? All the time, especially as an architect, I write all these technical documents. We write them quite often. You see Bitcoin improvement proposals, Ethereum improvement proposals. How come there's not one specific for the community? So what we did, because we couldn't find any examples of this, we actually created one ourselves. Shout out to Punk, Puffy J, Islander, the guys really helped craft this proposal. But after a couple months of putting our heads together, we came up with what we call the CIP 2021. I encourage you guys to kind of follow along with the different subjects in here, because we felt it was important to really analyze the areas of the community and just get it all out there, right? So the CIP is a one-year proposal, and it covers the most important topics for us, like our mission and purpose, the community roles, the governance and settings around that, our tokenomics, the platforms we use, and even some of the marketing strategy that we want to go through that over this year. So let's maybe go into the key pieces of it. So it was really important for us, and I think it's important for everybody, to just clearly define what your community's mission and purpose is. So for ArDrive, our mission is to create the best solution for anyone to store their data permanently. Nice, simple, easy to understand. And our community's purpose is to support, learn, and inspire one another to build and enhance the awareness of our mission. Right? Every founder, I think, should make these simple definitions, not just for yourself, but for your community. And we don't just have one type of person or skill set that we've seen so far in ArDrive. So we've started to identify the different subgroups that actually make up our larger community. So we have our general drivers, which have the soft skills, like marketing, communications, content, design. Our code drivers are our developers, engineers, real technical people. Our new group, the test drivers, help us out with providing early feedback and reviewing some of our designs and functionality. And then, of course, our community members. Those are the token holders, the people who see the benefits in keeping the ArDrive token and staying in touch with us. Perhaps we add to these groups in the future as we see things forming. We are trying to take an organic view of this, meaning we're not trying to force certain groups, but we'll see what happens. The community could always adjust. It was also very important for us to allow anyone to share their voice in the most comfortable means that they can. So we have a few different channels, and again, we're really clear about what you can use for what type of discussion, but we use Slack for our core private team chat, Discord for our tech support, Telegram announcements, Twitter, LinkedIn announcements, and I think it's also really important to have a defined support process specific for help, issues, bug reporting. So we also have that as well. And these things are, again, defined in the community improvement proposal, so we know what to expect over the next year. One of the things that we're missing, we may see a need to have, is some kind of private community group area. Right now, it's really just kind of the core team and the general public. So maybe there's something in between there that we might look to utilize in the future. We definitely have a lot about our token in the community improvement plan, right? That's important to how we build our community and how we kind of release our app. But in the proposal, we identify our token utility, right? There's two main usages that we have right now. Primarily, it's a profit sharing community, right? So all of the profit we earn through our applications are distributed to our token holders. And then you can also stake that token to participate in any of our community governance and finance. So it's a staple to our community token there. In the future, we're looking at potentially opening up other things with staking. So for example, if you stake your tokens, maybe you earn certain settings in ArDrive, achieve certain things, get new features, maybe you have to spend the token on certain things. So we want to be open about what the utility will be in the future. So maybe in the CIP 2022, we introduce a new usage model. Mentioned that being a community member and staking the tokens gives you the chance to participate in our governance. So we use Community XYZ to do that. What I have here is just all of the standard settings that any Community XYZ owner gets. So these are the settings that we have. Definitely encourage everybody to think long and hard about their own DAO settings. You have 4 types of votes you could use. What we've done in ArDrive is we force users to stake their tokens for a minimum of 7 days, a maximum of 3 years. And for a vote to pass, 51% have to vote yes. So you have to have that 51% support level, and 15% of the whole community needs to vote. So if only 10% of the vote weight goes in, the vote won't pass, even if everyone votes yes. So I think these are really important settings to understand and communicate out to your community members. What we also did was we defined a voting schedule, right? In the US, every 4 years we vote for a president, right? So it makes sense to have some kind of schedule for your important DAO votes. So what we decided to do is on the 1st of the month, we have our major votes, and every week we could submit minor votes. And this is to allow people to expect when certain votes are coming. We definitely want to be very forthcoming with what we're submitting for votes, and anybody can go into the DAO and submit a vote as they choose. So we're just really trying to do this to give people a heads up and know when they would expect to maybe stake their tokens beforehand. Of course, we define our tokenomics. This has been a super important thing for me to do as a founder, something that I never necessarily knew how to do, but really important in our CIP, really important for our community to understand what we're doing with the tokens, where they're going, how many tokens that we're creating. We have a 10 million token soft cap. It's a soft cap because PSCs, profit sharing communities, can always vote to have more tokens. But we primarily want to use these tokens to fund our operations, build our community, and you can kind of see some of the different buckets that we plan on using them for. I really encourage everyone to think long and hard about some of these allocations, because it's hard to kind of reverse some of these decisions. Part of our token model is to reward our users for being a part of the community and using our apps. So we identified 3 key reward areas. And this is really in response to some of the things we did try to do, and we didn't have positive results. Like, for example, we tried a scheme on Twitter where you could kind of tweet about ArDrive, you get some tokens and things like that. It's hard to be successful with because they could be abused really easily. So we wanted to incentivize 3 main things. 1, referring people for ArDrive. 2, uploading quality content to ArDrive. And 3, using ArDrive. So unlike typical blockchain protocols that have their rewards kind of baked in, we have the luxury of being able to change it up over time, right? And adjust these mechanisms and adjust the amounts of tokens going out. And then finally, we ended our community improvement proposal with some of the metrics that we are going to look at to know we're successful. I think this is important for any community, business, app. You always have to know how well you're doing. So these are some of the things that we're tracking, like, for example, how many people are following us on social media, our community growth, our publications, our response time for getting back on user issues, problems. And some of the reports and some of the data gathering here isn't completed yet. So, there is a need there to, for example, understand how many replications of your file is on the Arweave network. So some things we actually have to work on to collect these metrics. Going through a document like the community improvement proposal definitely forces you to clarify a lot of things about your new community. Maybe you'll learn some things as you go through it. Maybe you'll realize you don't really have a community in the end, but I think it's a good exercise to do. On the flip side of all this community talk, we are working with some really incredible technology. So let's move on and talk about the protocol that we layer on top of Arweave to meet the needs of the ArDrive applications. So Arweave doesn't come with a native way to manage your uploaded data like a file system. So we had an opportunity to innovate a bit when we first started ArDrive. So the vision was that any application connected to the permaweb can interact with this protocol, giving users additional privacy options and share that same set of permanent data. And this could really eliminate a lot of the data silos and pockets that we see on the traditional web today. So we created this open and extendable protocol to support that vision. We call it ARFs, or Arweave FS, and it's really an append-only transaction data model. We say it's append-only because you can't delete data on Arweave. You can only add to it. And what it does is it allows the state of a file system or a drive to be constructed by any client or app that uses it. And it supports things like changing file versions, renaming, moving, custom metadata. It defines an encryption process to support true end-to-end privacy. And all the data that uses RFS can easily be queried by any application using Arweave and GraphQL. So let's get into it a little bit more. The data model is designed to be really flexible. We use what we call entities to represent the different file system states. Each entity has a really specific schema with a unique UUID. Entity metadata is actually split across GraphQL tags and a JSON file. And the reason why we do that is because some of this metadata does get encrypted, like, for example, the folder name. We really don't want to expose anything about this, about your private information. And then it's also important to note that files, actual file data, is separated between the data transaction and a metadata transaction. And this allows you to change the metadata about that file over time without having to re-upload the data itself. So we have three entity types now. Drives are the top-level container of all of your files and folders, and they kind of act as that security boundary. And you create those with a single metadata transaction. Folders are a collection of files or subfolders, pretty self-explanatory, also achieved by a single metadata transaction. And then files are actually a combination of the actual file data and the metadata about the file, like its timestamp, file name, and anything else you would want to specify. And that metadata transaction points to the data transaction. I mentioned that there's a privacy model built into our Arweave file system. We fully believe that if you don't hold the encryption keys to your data, then it's not fully private. So every file that leverages the privacy option in our Arweave file system uses a symmetric encryption algorithm and takes a combination of the user's Arweave wallet, a signature from their wallet, and what we call their drive password. So maybe let's walk through the encryption process a little bit, starting on the left. So first, we get a SHA-256 signature of a unique drive ID that we create using your Arweave wallet. You see here a little ArConnect logo, because luckily we're able to integrate with them to support this type of wallet signature. We then take that SHA-256 signature and use a hash-based key derivation function to determine the drive key. And that's where we combine the drive password. We take that drive key and then we derive all the file keys using that same hash-based key derivation function and each file's unique file ID. And that's what creates our encrypted buffer. So we then tag that and upload that to the permaweb. So you can see that your keys never leave your computer and the file never leaves your computer without being encrypted. So just to walk through kind of the data model and building a drive, the drive holds all of your files and folders. It could be public, it could be private. If it is private, there's a few more tags you have to add. And the data JSON for a private file is also encrypted with that same AES 256 process that I just walked through. You can follow up with us at the booth. We have links to our Arweave file system. I'm not going to get into the details of each tag, but you can just kind of get a sense of how things are laid out. You could also build a folder as well. Folders reference that drive ID and the parent folder ID. If it's a root folder of a drive, there is no parent, so that's how you define that. And files, again, have a metadata transaction and a data transaction. The metadata TX references the data TX to allow that additional flexibility. You'll see that both file data and file metadata have their own cipher and initialization vector. And again, this is to support the privacy and the encryption of both the core file data and its metadata. It's important to point out that you can always add more GraphQL tags to this. You can also add additional tags to the data JSON as well. So if you connect all the dots and see how it all fits together, this is kind of a view of a private drive. Folders and files reference their parents and the underlying drive via those unique IDs. And you can essentially end up with a drive where different applications are adding different kinds of files from different sources. And that could be public or private data. So I think that sounds pretty cool, and I think that's a real nice way to connect some of these applications across our Web3 community. Once the files have been tagged and submitted in mind, querying for them is really, really easy. And that's because Arweave now has GraphQL. So the benefit of using this real strict information architecture like RFS is that it makes it really straightforward to find your files later. We have lots of code examples on GitHub you could check out. But this is how you would create the state of a drive. You get all the drives for a user, you get their root folder, you get all the entities for that drive, and then you're just mapping the IDs to names. For the private data, you pull the cipher initialization vector tag, and that's what you can then use to decrypt it. So again, we have lots of code examples you could reference to put this into your application. We're always looking to update RFS. It's on version 0.11 now. We would like to soon move that to 12. We're introducing some new things like hiding files, folders, and drives, maybe introducing an NFT entity using the Arweave atomic standard, maybe integrating with the Squad social protocol, and a few other things. It's important to note that we're definitely looking for co-authors, right? This is not meant to be, we're not calling this ArDrive FS, this is Arweave FS, and we wanted it to be a collaboration between everyone in the Arweave ecosystem. So if you have thoughts and ideas around how this could be extended further, we'd love to hear about it. I've definitely had my own tips and kind of lessons learned as being a founder. This is my first, entrepreneurial experience. So, some things may be kind of common sense to others, or may not be common sense to others, but these are the things that really struck me. I already mentioned it, but tokenomics can definitely be hard if you're not familiar with it. It takes a lot of time and planning, so make sure you give it the time needed. As a founder, I really think you have to go all in, right? If you're not putting in that effort, somebody else is. You really need to also identify any of the one-way decisions. Someone on my team keyed me into this, and I think it makes a lot of sense, right? A one-way decision is something that you can't really come back from once you decide it. So if you identify a decision as being one way, then perhaps you look at the risk and rewards a little bit differently and really, weigh the pros and cons of making that decision. Creating profit-sharing communities, really easy. You can click a few buttons, spend a little bit of AR, and get your own token. It's not so easy to understand the legal and tax aspects of that. Absolutely recommend every founder to look into that as they're going through this process. Don't save it for the end because it does take time and there's a lot to learn. Don't be afraid to experiment and fail. We're working with really new tech, so some things might not work, but you got to try to see what sticks. Part of that is also being really flexible, right? You may not have the perfect situation starting up a new project. So I think having flexibility with your team, the tools, the technology you use is really important. When you're designing an incentive mechanism, try to find a scammer hat to put on. right? Because there's always going to be somebody out there trying to game your token or get as much reward for as minimal effort as possible. So really try to put yourself in their shoes and see what could happen by doing some kind of incentive mechanism. It's always important, I think, to be yourself. Unique people make unique things, right? We don't need more copies. Don't trust, but verify your resources. So, you know, a lesson learned for me was that it's easy to lose time and money on the wrong people, right? So just because somebody says they can do something or a resume looks nice, always important to get referrals, see work, check out code, do that due diligence to save yourself some hassle. And then finally, important for every Arweave founder is to think permanently. What's your app or service going to be like in a year, 5, 10, 20, 50 years, right? Because that's the lifespan of Arweave. So you really have to think about the dependencies on your apps, what it's using, who you're relying on, what other services, and yeah, try to think permanently. So with that, I did want to leave you all with an announcement of our next usage mining program called Dust. It's actually using the acetine algorithm that Tate just mentioned, but we're rewarding up to 800 tokens per day for the next 6 months to all the top data uploaders. First reward's going out tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern, so go to app.ardrive.io and start uploading now. And thank you, everyone. This is, first our conference. I've been looking forward to something like this for a really long time. So come to our booth to learn more about ArDrive and check out our open roles for community manager and developer. And thanks again.